Hey, welcome back to Restless Part 3. Hey, last week, if you were with us, I gave you a question and some homework, and I encourage you to ask this question, why the hurry? And the reason I wanted to do that was because we spend so much time in our life in a hurry when we don't need to be. And for the first two sort of parts of this series, we've really made the case against hurry. We looked at the fact that most of us have probably got hurry sickness in week 1. And lastly, we talked about the high cost of hurry and how it prevents us, how it's almost at the opposite end of the spectrum from living a Christ-centered life. And what we're going to do today is we're going to look at a better way to do life. Because I think over the last couple of weeks, a lot of us have felt quite vulnerable. A lot of us have felt quite challenged. A lot of us have felt there's been a bit in your face. We haven't given a whole lot of solutions yet. But hopefully asking that question, why am I in a hurry, started to change your mindset. And maybe you're watching this and you're like, damn, I was meant to do that last week and I didn't. Hey, why don't you take a moment now to put that note into your calendar, a whole lot of times through the week, or set up a stopwatch that just keeps going and going and going. So it reminds you to consistently ask yourself, why am I in a hurry? But today, as we look at a better way, we're going to start by looking at an invitation that Jesus makes to every single one of us. I absolutely love this invitation. So come with me, let's have a look at it now. Jesus says this, he says, "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." What a passage. And we'll unpack it in a moment, but before we do, let me show you this passage in the Message translation, because I think Eugene Peterson, who pulled this together, does such an incredible job. He says it this way: "Are you tired, worn out, burned out on religion? Come to me, get away with me, and you'll recover your life. I'll show you how to take a real rest. Walk with me and work with me. Watch how I do it. Learn the unforced rhythms of grace. I won't lay anything heavy or ill-fitting on you. Keep company with me and you'll learn to live freely and lightly." Doesn't that encapsulate it so well? But hey, just jump back. Let's read this one more time in the more standard interpretation of this text. And here's the invitation: "Come to me, all who are weary and burdened." Now, how are you feeling at the moment? I've got a sense that this series is resonating with so many of us, because that is how we feel. We feel weary, we feel burdened, we feel tired, we feel restless. So if those of us who are, come to Jesus and he will give us rest. And he says, take my yoke, and we'll hold on that word. I'll talk about that in a moment. He says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me. And I love what he says here, for I am gentle and humble in heart. Oftentimes, people can think about God, and they can think God is a big angry God in the sky who's trying to smite people, or he's out to get people, or he's disinterested, or he's trying to rush people into his purposes. Well, what I read here, Jesus says, no, I am gentle and I'm humble in heart. What an incredible God he is. And you will find rest for your souls. See, well, one of the things we often like to do is sleep, and it helps us rest physically. But how many times have you gone and had a really good night's sleep? I mean, not just a normal night's sleep where you might have 8 hours, if that's good for you, but where you've had a real good 10-hour sleep and you've gone, man, this is going to be good. But you wake up and your soul is still just as restless. Yes, physically you've had more than enough sleep, but there's just some inner turmoil and your soul isn't rested. What Jesus offers isn't just rest, but rest for our souls. And he says this: "For my yoke is easy and my burden is light." We don't have to carry this big weight, all of this extra stuff. No. If we're yoked with Jesus, our yoke is easy and the burden is light. So let me just explain real quickly what a yoke is. This is a yoke here holding the two animals together. And what a yoke does is the yoke forces the two animals to walk side by side in partnership together. One can't pull away while one goes slow because they're locked together. One can't go left while the other goes right. No, they're locked together. They work together at the same pace, going in the same direction, yoked together. And that's what Jesus says. He says, take my yoke upon you. He's saying, hey, I can walk through this life with you. Let's do this, in our case, arm in arm, hand in hand, right alongside one another. A real interesting observation about what a yoke is comes from a scholar who's done a lot of work on the book of Matthew. And talking about this passage, Frederick Dale Bruner says, a yoke is a work instrument. Thus, when Jesus offers a yoke, he offers what we might think tired workers need least. When we think of tired workers, they need a mattress or a vacation, not a yoke. We might say they need to spend a week on the golden sands of a Fijian beach, or they need to go down to Queenstown and sit in a spa pool looking out over the Remarkables. They need somewhere nice to sleep, a nice holiday to escape from. But what Bruner points out is that, hey, what Jesus offers actually is a piece of work equipment. See, that the problem isn't that we don't need to work. In fact, we were designed to work. The problem we have is how we are working and how we're going about our lives. We've got to adjust the way in which we do things. See, an incredible statement that Jesus once made was, I am the way and the truth and the life. He said, I am all three things. I am the way, I am the truth, I am the life. Well, Eugene Peterson, who was the person who pulled that translation of the Message Bible together, he says it this way. He says that we need the way and we need the truth in order to live the life that Jesus has got for us. That as Christians, we spend a lot of time focusing on the truth, what we believe, our theology, and how we should behave, kind of like our ethics, but we don't spend a lot of time on the way and looking at how Jesus lived. And he puts it to us that if we walk the way that Jesus created us to live and we live our life the way that Jesus wants us to live it, and rather than just looking at what Jesus says as we look through the Gospels, we actually look at the way that Jesus lived, the patterns, the habits, the practices that he instilled, we'll discover the way. And then if we combine that with the truth, we'll find ourselves living the Jesus life. And so what I really want to do today and next week is we unpack a little bit more in this series to help us overcome the sense of restlessness and spend a lot more time focusing on the way rather than simply looking at the truth. And I want to begin today by talking about silence and solitude. See, in fact, many of us, we struggle with the idea of silence, don't we? Well, we love to have a lot happening. In fact, there's a good chance if you're watching this on a computer that you've got a different tab open while you might be doing some emails or doing a whole lot of other things while you're listening to this, but you're not watching it because we like to be doing so much and we find ourselves easily distracted. But that's not what we're always called to be, because we're always wanting to create more noise. We find ourselves in a noisy world, but there's something powerful about silence and solitude. So you think about, when was the last time you spent some time silently? Here, let me try this. I'm going to go quiet. I'm going to ask you just to remain quiet and just be quiet for a period of time. Come on, let's just experience a little bit of silence right now. Right, if you found that uncomfortable, I'll tell you, it was a whole lot more uncomfortable for me just staring at the camera. Because, hey, silence is something that in our day and age we often struggle with. In fact, I just read a report this week about a TV series where they got two family members to stand and just stare at each other in the eyes for 4 minutes. and absolute silence. They weren't allowed to talk. There was no other things around that could make noise. They were just told to stare at each other for 4 minutes. And what they found was the emotional impact of this engagement for 4 minutes was incredibly profound. In fact, a lot of people sort of burst into tears. Some of them would burst into tears because they were so proud of their son, or they were so proud of their daughter. Others would burst into tears because of the sense of shame that they had, because maybe the mistakes they'd made as a parent, or because of the way that they've been living their life, they knew their parents wouldn't be proud of. That sometimes it allowed a parent to start to call out things in the kid, that offer words of encouragement and help them see the potential that's within them. They haven't spoken out over them for years because of this 4 minutes silence. But it was just phenomenal, they said, that the way that these emotions were brought to the surface when family members get that just 4 minutes in silence looking at one another. We live in a world where there is so much noise coming at us, where we're getting signs coming, posts, billboards and magazines and notifications on our phones, where as soon as we get into a car, we generally reach and turn the radio on, where most of us go through life with earpods in our ears, doing stuff, trying to fill the noise that's around us. And so what I want to do is just talk about the power of silence and solitude, because this was a practice that was really, really prevalent in Jesus' life. In fact, if we go right back to the day Jesus got baptized, he goes down to the River Jordan, John the Baptist there. John the Baptist baptizes Jesus. Jesus comes up. There's an audible voice from heaven where God says, hey, this is my son, whom I love and with whom I am well pleased. The Holy Spirit comes down like a dove. And then what happens next? Jesus goes out into the desert for 40 days and 40 nights where he fasts. And at the end of that time, the devil, Satan, comes to Jesus to tempt Jesus. And I've always read that story this way. I've always read that story and thought, man, the devil, he's a cunning man. He waits till Jesus is at his weakest point, where he's been isolated for 40 days, where he's been withdrawn for 40 days, where he's been fasting for 40 days, and then pounces to attack him, because that's when Jesus is at his weakest. But can I suggest that maybe Jesus isn't at his weakest point after 40 days in the wilderness, 40 days fasting, that perhaps this is a point in which Jesus is at his strongest. So you think about this, who's smarter, Jesus or the devil? I'm putting all my money on Jesus. He's way smarter than the devil. He knows the devil's going to attack, so wouldn't he get himself to his strongest point? Maybe, just maybe, the 40 days of silence and solitude of Jesus withdrawing was what put him at the height of his spiritual powers, so he was ready to take on the devil in the way in which he did. Maybe, just maybe, that's why we see throughout the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, Jesus continuing to withdraw, continuing to find places of solitude and of silence, because that is where his strength comes from. See, what if Jesus wasn't, in fact, isolated? He was in such strong community with his Heavenly Father throughout those 40 days that when the devil came at him, the devil had nothing, because Jesus was so spiritually strong. See, it reminds me of the time at the end of Jesus' life when Jesus is on the cross and Jesus dies. And I think, again, the devil at that point is going, yes, we've won. We've killed the Son of God. God's got nothing left. The victory is ours. Yes, only to find out that the tomb that Jesus' body was put into was later emptied. When the devil thought he had a great plan, Jesus' plan was even greater. I really do wonder if Jesus spent these 40 days in the desert strengthening himself for what is to come. And when he took on the devil, he was at the height of his spiritual powers, not the lowest. But what's really interesting about it is the word that's translated as desert, eremos. This word can be translated as desert, or as deserted place, or as desolate place, or as solitary place, or a lonely place, or quiet place even, or wilderness. And we see this word used many times in the New Testament when Jesus just goes away to a quiet place. He does not necessarily go out to the desert, but to a place where it's a lot more quiet. And what I want to encourage us to do is to go to our quiet place and experience solitude and silence. Another example happens in the first chapter of Mark. And what's interesting about this is the day that Jesus has had. In fact, Jesus woke up this morning, and on this particular morning, he was out teaching at the synagogue. So he had a pretty full-on morning. They went back to Peter's house for lunch, and over lunch, he healed Peter's mother-in-law. So Jesus again still working through lunch, and then he spends the afternoon and through the evening, he's spending his time healing the sick and casting out demons. So he's had a massive, massive day of ministry, and this is where this kicks in. So let's look at what Mark tells us. Very early the next morning, so after this massive day of ministry, very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place. It's that same word again, where Jesus prayed. Jesus has had the most action-packed day. You think, man, this is a good chance for him to kick back, take it easy the next morning. Hey, team, we've worked hard all day. It's been a long one. Haven't really had a chance to relax. So why don't we all just sleep in? We'll get up tomorrow a little bit later, maybe have a big brunch together, and then keep going. No. After Jesus' massive day, he gets up very early the next morning. And Mark continues, and he says, Simon and his companions went to look for Jesus. When they found him, they exclaimed, Jesus, everyone's looking for you. In other words, Jesus, everyone knows what's happened yesterday. Everyone's back for some more. We've got to get back there because, man, everyone's waiting. And look at what Jesus says. Jesus says, let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. That is why I have come. So Jesus gets up early after a big day, goes and has this time of solitude and silence. The disciples find him and say, Jesus, we've got to get back. The people are wanting us. You've got more to do. And Jesus says, no. Let's go somewhere else. See, I think it's in the times of silence and solitude that we're able to ascertain and determine what it is we should be doing. Would it have been good for Jesus to go back? Absolutely. But was it the best thing for Jesus to do? Clearly not. It's in these times of silence and solitude that we can really get some direction. We can really figure out what truly is important and then make sure we go and do that. How many of us are living busy lives, not because our life's so busy of all of this important stuff that needs to happen, but often because there's so much trivial stuff that we used to fill up our time, which in the end doesn't really matter. And if we can take that time of silence and solitude to reflect, maybe, just maybe, we'll get the clarity that Jesus had about what to do and what not to do. Again, a little bit later in the book of Mark, we see another situation. Again, I love this one, and this is how this sort of passage begins. So many people were coming and going that Jesus and the disciples, did not even have a chance to eat. Have you ever felt that restless, that busy, where your day just sort of goes and you don't even get the chance to stop for morning tea or lunch or a chance to have a little snack? That's exactly what's going on here. So Jesus said to them, come with me by yourselves to a quiet place and get some rest. What an invitation. They're going, yes, that's what we've been waiting for, Jesus. Let's go. So what happens? They went away by themselves in a boat to a solitary place. But many who saw them leaving recognized them and ran on foot from all the towns and got there ahead of them. How often does this but play out in our life? Where we're going to go, we have some time reserved where we're going to step back, we're going to take it a little bit easier, but we get that phone call from our boss saying something needs to get done ASAP and we've got to get onto it. That we're going to go and take that time to get away, but our flatmate wants to have a talk with us because of a whole lot of stuff that's going on in their world, and a few hours later we find ourselves still on the couch having that conversation, hearing what's going on in their world. We try and get that little bit of time to ourselves, but we get the phone call from the school saying that our kid's sick and we've got to go and pick them up. We were trying to get that time away from ourselves, but our friend really needs to catch us. I love the reality of the situation. They went to get away, but everyone saw what they were doing and they ran on ahead of them. So Jesus landed, he saw a large crowd, he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching them many things, and by this time, It was already late in the day. Now, before we get to this next verse, what happens here is the passage about the feeding of 5,000. There's all these people. And so Jesus says to his disciples, hey, we've got to feed all of these people. It's already late in the day. And yet this incredible miracle where they take a few fish and a few loaves of bread and they feed 5,000 people still takes place. So I imagine by the time that's all happened and the food's distributed and everyone's eating, it's getting pretty late now. And it says immediately Jesus made his disciples get into the boat and go on ahead of him to Bethsaida while Jesus dismissed the crowd. So he says to the disciples, you guys go, I'll get rid of the crowd. So again, it's been another full-on day for Jesus. They haven't had a chance to eat. They tried to get away. They couldn't get away. He continued teaching. They feed the multitudes of people. And then finally, Jesus dismisses the crowds, and look what he does next. After leaving them, Jesus went up on a mountainside to pray. He went to a lonely place. He went somewhere where he could experience some silence and some solitude. And how long did he stay there? Well, it just says later that night, the boat was in the middle of the lake. Imagine it takes a while from the boat to get from the side of the lake to the middle of the lake. All that time, Jesus was praying and he was alone on the land. See, it was a practice for Jesus to go and take times of silence and solitude. And what's interesting, especially if you look through the Gospel of Luke, you actually see this play out, that the busier Jesus got, the more that he was doing, the more times you'd actually see him withdraw for silence and solitude. Where we tend to be the opposite, don't we? That when life gets really busy, that's when we don't take the moments and we don't take the chance to find silence and solitude. And when life's cruisy and easy, we go, I can do it now because life's easy. Well, what we see Jesus model for us, if we're going to live the Jesus way, is the busier we get, the more that's on our plate in a current season, the more time we need to find for silence and solitude. That is the Jesus way. That's what you and I are called to do. That's what we should do. And so what I'd like to do in the remaining moments we sort of have now is just share a few quick tips on what this looks like, on how you and I can purposefully find silence and solitude. And the first one is simply this, is just to start small. We're going to start small. See, think of it this way. If you've decided, man, I want to run a marathon, or maybe I want to bench press 100 kgs, then most of us aren't going to be able to get out straight away and run that marathon or jump on that weights bench for the first time, load two 20 kg plates onto each side of the bar and push 100 kg sort of bench. It's just not going to work. We've got to do a whole lot of work. We've got to start small. Man, I want to run a marathon, but I'm going to start by today going for a 3K run to start to boost my fitness. Man, I want to bench press 100 kgs. That'd be awesome. But man, I'm going to start today with only 60 because I know that's what I can get started with. We've got to start small. When it comes to silence and solitude, this concept can be so foreign and so far out there for most of us that, man, you don't want to go and try and do an hour or 2 hours or 4 hours. Man, you really don't want to go and sign up for a 72-hour retreat in a monastery in full silence because I'll tell you what, you're probably just not ready for it yet. Could that be a good thing? Probably. Is it the right thing to do straight away? Probably not. Because what we're going to do is we're going to start small. We're going to start with maybe 2 minutes. We're going to just set a timer and try and enjoy silence for 2 minutes. You see, we live in such a busy world, we struggle with silence. I remember when I was about 14 years old, I was working for my uncle. I got paid about $24 a week. And I saved my money because I wanted to buy a stereo for my bedroom. It was one of those old school ones. You could have like 5 CDs in it at the same time. And the big speakers and the big unit in the middle. It was cool. And I was proud of it. And I spent a lot of money buying this thing for my bedroom. And do you know what I did every night? Every night I'd put a sleep timer on it and I'd listen to Radio Sport as I fell asleep because I just liked the sound. If I was talking about dumb things on Radio Sport, I'd switch over to Talkback and I'd listen to Marcus Lush. And that was sort of how I'd go to bed. And the crazy thing is, all these years later, often now when I go to bed, I'll still put headphones in my ears and I'll listen to a podcast. Oftentimes I won't listen to many more than a few sentences of the podcast, but there's something nice about having the noise in my ears as I fall asleep. Well, it's because we live in such a noisy world that I struggle with silence, and the chances are you do too, because everywhere we go, there's so much noise coming at us. So what we have to do, if we're going to really do silence and solitude well, is we've got to start small. Because the other thing that can start to happen when you take this time for silence and solitude is you actually start to confront some of these emotions that you realize we've been creating a whole lot of noise around us so we don't have to feel them. Maybe the sense of shame about something that's happened in our life starts to rise to the surface because we're giving it room to come through. And rather than filling it with noise, it starts to get a little bit awkward. Maybe there might be a sense of pride because of some great things that you've got going on. Maybe it might be a sense of failure. It might be a sense of betrayal. But there's all these emotions that we can feel that we often use and we mask and we cover with noise so we don't really feel them. We really want to numb them. And so what we really have to do is get skilled at and build the ability to really make the most of silence and solitude. So the best thing you can do, same as what I can do, is to simply start small. Okay, tip number 2 is we've got to shut off, and excuse me, Mum, we've got to shut up. Well, what are you talking about, Clint? We've got to shut ourselves off and we've got to shut ourselves up. When it comes to noise, there's external noise and there's internal noise. We've got to shut off all the external noise. What does that mean? We've got to turn off our phone. We don't want to get the notifications coming through. We want to take the AirPods out of our ears and turn off all the noise. We want to make sure there's no TVs going. We want to put ourselves in an environment where we're not going to get distracted, where there's not going to be a whole lot of other noise coming at us. You don't sit in your lounge if you've got 3 kids running around because you're not going to be shutting yourself off. You've got to find a place where you can shut yourself off from external noise. In our world, that is a challenge. Yet what's way more challenging than shutting off the external is shutting up the internal. See, even when we shut off the external noise, how often is it that our brain's still motoring at 100 mile an hour? Ideas about this and 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 this, and I've got to get this done, and I've got to remember that, and I've got to do, and how's the situation going to play out, and what's going to happen then, and what's he going to think when I say that, and how's she going to feel when I do that? And our brain just goes, zzz. But we've got to get to a place where we can just shut that internal noise up, and we can just be. See, one of the incredible things about our culture in which we live in today is, and we've made so many strides in terms of productivity that as a group of people, we are way more productive today than any other point in human history. But the problem with this pursuit of productivity is it's made us feel a lot more machine-like and a lot less human. And what we need to learn to be is human beings, not just human doings. And in order to really be, we've got to get to that place where we can shut off that external noise and slowly but surely shut up that internal noise so we can get to that place where we can just be. So what are we going to do, Tim? We're going to start small. We're not going to try and set a big, huge time thing. No, because we're just doomed to fail and it's going to be awkward. We're going to start small and we're going to learn to shut off the external and to shut up the internal. And then thirdly, what we're going to do is we're going to stay strong. We're going to stay strong. You see, well, what can happen is if you're anything like me, you're going to go like this. You're going to go, okay, I'll give this a try, Clint. I'm going to go and do 30 minutes tomorrow, and I'll do 30 minutes the next day. And you'll get to the end of those 2 days and be like, well, that sucked. That's a waste of time. It's not really for me. Bad, wrong, poor thinking. If this is the Jesus way, it is for you. You're just not ready for it yet. You haven't built the right strength to handle it yet. And you've got to understand my responsibility is to stay strong. That's why we want to start small so we can build our muscles and we can get there over time. See, it's like someone who I really want to bench press 100 kgs. Cool. I'm going to start with 60. I'm going to keep doing that. I might move to 65. Then I might move to 70. I'm going to move to 75. If you keep doing that consistently enough over time, eventually you'll get to the place where you can bench press 100 kgs. Or it's the same with the marathon. In fact, if you're watching this and you might go, that's easy, Clint, I can run a marathon, or I can bench press 100 kgs, it will be because you're already training in that particular way. And the most important thing you and I can do when it comes to staying strong is to have a mindset about training. See, We can be training or we can be trying. If you come into this and you say, man, I'm going to try this thing. I'm going to try this. Do you know what? It's not going to work for you. Because you're going to say, I tried it and it didn't work for me. Because it's going to be awkward and it's going to be, and it's going to be really, really difficult at first. So rather than talking about, I'm going to try this, it's like, I'm going to train for this. You see, something powerful happens in us when we say, I'm training for something. Because when I'm training for something, failure isn't final. If I want to try something and I fail, it means I tried and I failed and it's sort of the end of it. I'm going to try and run a marathon. I only got 2.3 Ks in and I was stuffed. I failed. I'm giving up. I don't need to try any longer. If I'm training in my first run, I make it 2.3 Ks, it's like, that's a start. That's why I need to train. Now I know my base level that I can then train to increase moving forward when it comes to silence and solitude. Now, I'm not trying to do silence and solitude. I'm training my ability to do silence and solitude. And I'm going to train for 4 minutes today or 8 minutes today, whatever it may be. I'm going to train, I'm going to train, I'm going to train. Why? Because I want to do things the Jesus way. I don't want to go through a life carrying a heavy yoke with all of this stuff and living this restless spirit like I've got right now. I'm not going to walk in my strength. I'm not going to do it the way that everyone else is. No, I'm going to do it the Jesus way. Because if I want to live the life that Jesus has offered, then I've got to walk in his way and I've got to know his truth. It's a combination of the two. So when it comes to solitude and when it comes to silence, what am I going to do? I'm going to train myself. I'm going to train myself. And it's going to feel awkward. Every time we try and do something new for the first few times, it feels awkward. Maybe you're learning to surf, to play tennis. It feels awkward at first, but once you've done it enough, it starts to come naturally. You might be learning a golf swing. So I've been doing it at the moment, trying to learn my golf swing. I'll tell you what, it feels awkward as I've been trying to change my swing to hit the ball straighter and better. And it feels awkward, But the more that I do it, the more natural it starts to become. It's the same with almost everything. When we're trying to learn a new habit or we're trying to learn a new skill, we start off awkward. All right. Great. It's a process. So when it comes to silence and when it comes to solitude, I'm not trying. I'm training. Because I don't want you to come back to me next week and be like, Clint, I tried it. It's not for me. Because that is not okay. If we're going to be more like Christ, we have to train ourselves to do this. So we're not trying. No. We're training. So hey, why don't you train right now? Well, what I'd love to do is we're going to play a song for you. This song lasts about 3.5 minutes or so. This is a little bit cheating because there is some external stimulus here. You're not going into complete silence. But why don't you listen to the song? Why don't, as you listen to it, you just try and shut up all that internal noise. Just maybe close your eyes if that's what's going to help you. And just really let the lyrics to the song wash over you. Then I'll come back because I would love nothing more than to pray for you. Enjoy this.
In the darkness, we were waiting without hope, without light, till from heaven you came running. There was mercy in your eyes to fulfill the law and prophets. To a virgin came the word, from a throne of endless glory to a cradle in the dirt. Praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of Kings. To reveal the kingdom coming and to reconcile the lost, to redeem the whole creation. You did not conquered death, and the dead rose from their tombs, and the angels stood in awe for the souls of all who'd come to the Father are restored, and the church of Christ was born. Then the Spirit lit the flame. Now this gospel truth of old shall not kneel, shall not faint. By his blood and in his name, in his freedom I am free. For the love of Jesus Christ, who has resurrected me. Oh, praise the Father, praise the Son, praise the Spirit, three in one. God of glory, majesty, praise forever to the King of kings. Praise forever to the King of kings.
All right, team, let me pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for every single person watching this, listening to this, engaging with this. Father, I pray you'll give them the ability and the strength to train well. I pray you'll help them to start small, not with these crazy big expectations as to what they should do, maybe because of what other people are doing, but help them just to feel confident in starting small. I pray, Lord God, that you'll really help them to just shut off all that external noise and also get to that place where they can shut up all the internal noise. And Father, I really, really do pray that you help them stay strong, that they'll just keep on training, keep on training, keep on training, keep on training. Because Father, when we get to that place where we can experience that silence and solitude the way that Jesus modeled for us, that when life gets busy, rather than it being the first thing to go, man, it's the first thing we look forward to. It's the thing we want to make sure we do. So we can get our priorities in order. We can get clarity about what we should be saying yes to and what we should be saying no to. We can be getting clarity about what we need to engage in different situations. And we can just be reminded that, man, you're our loving Father that wants to hang out with us, that wants to spend time with us, that cares about us. So, Father, I really, really do pray you help all of us to grow in this area with a skill that's so countercultural to what else is going on around us. Yet we see coming through in all these different places like meditation and all of this stuff. But yet, man, this is a practice that Christians have been holding dear for millennia. So, Father, I pray for every person that you'll help them stay strong, experience the gift of solitude and the gift of silence. Pray this in Jesus' name. I'll see you back here next week. Thank you very much.